And he is a count? A Tuscan count. Well, we must put up with that, said the countess, who was herself from one of the oldest Venetian families. What sort of a man is he? Asked the Vicomte de Mercer.
You hear, M. de Mercer, I am referred to you, said the countess.
We should be very hard to please, madam, returned Albert, did we not think him delightful? A friend of 10 years' standing could not have done more for us, or with a more perfect courtesy. Come, observed the countess, smiling, I see my vampire is only some millionaire, who has taken the appearance of Lara in order to avoid being confounded with M. de Rothschild, and you have seen her? Her? The beautiful Greek of yesterday. No, we heard, I think, the sound of her xla, but she remained perfectly invisible. When you say invisible, interrupted Albert, it is only to keep up the mystery. For whom do you take the blue domino at the window with the white curtains? Where was this window with white hangings? Asked the countess. At the Rispoli Palace. The count had 3 windows at the Rispoli Palace? Yes. Did you pass through the Corso? Yes. Well, did you notice 2 windows hung with yellow damask, and one with white damask with a red cross? Those were the count's windows. Why, he must be a nabob. Do you know what those 3 windows were worth? 200 or 300 Roman crowns? 2,000 or 3,000. The deuce. Does his island produce him such a revenue? It does not bring him a baiocco. Then why did he purchase it? For a whim. He is an original, then. In reality, observed Albert, he seemed to me somewhat eccentric. Were he at Paris, and a frequenter of the theatres, I should say he was a poor devil literally mad. This morning he made 2 or 3 exits worthy of Didier or Anthony. At this moment a fresh visitor entered, and, according to custom, Franz gave up his seat to him. This circumstance had, moreover, the effect of changing the conversation. An hour afterwards the 2 friends returned to their hotel. Signor Pastrini had already set about procuring their disguises for the morrow, and he assured them that they would be perfectly satisfied. The next morning, at 9 o'clock, he entered Franz's room, followed by a tailor, who had 8 or 10 Roman peasant costumes on his arm. They selected two exactly alike, and charged the tailor to sew on each of their hats about 20 yards of ribbon, and to procure them two of the long silk sashes of different colors with which the lower orders decorate themselves on fete days. Albert was impatient to see how he looked in his new dress, a jacket and breeches of blue velvet, silk stockings with clocks, shoes with buckles, and a silk waistcoat. This picturesque attire set him off to great advantage, and when he had bound the scarf around his waist, and when his hat, placed coquettishly on one side, let fall on his shoulder a stream of ribbons, Franz was forced to confess that costume has much to do with the physical superiority we accord to certain nations. The Turks used to be so picturesque with their long and flowing robes, but are they not now hideous with their blue frocks buttoned up to the chin, and their red caps, which make them look like a bottle of wine with a red seal? Franz complimented Albert, who looked at himself in the glass with an unequivocal smile of satisfaction. They were thus engaged when the Count of Monte Cristo entered. "Gentlemen," said he, "although a companion is agreeable, perfect freedom is sometimes still more agreeable. I come to say that today, and for the remainder of the carnival, I leave the carriage entirely at your disposal." The host will tell you I have 3 or 4 more, so that you will not inconvenience me in any way. Make use of it, I pray you, for your pleasure or your business. The young men wished to decline, but they could find no good reason for refusing an offer which was so agreeable to them. The Count of Monte Cristo remained a quarter of an hour with them, conversing on all subjects with the greatest ease. He was, as we have already said, perfectly well acquainted with the literature of all countries. A glance at the walls of his salon proved to Franz and Albert that he was a connoisseur of pictures. A few words he let fall showed them that he was no stranger to the sciences, and he seemed much occupied with chemistry. The two friends did not venture to return the Count the breakfast he had given them. It would have been too absurd to offer him in exchange for his excellent table the very inferior one of Signor Pastrini. They told him so frankly, and he received their excuses with the air of a man who appreciated their delicacy. Albert was charmed with the Count's manners, and he was only prevented from recognizing him for a perfect gentleman by reason of his varied knowledge. The permission to do what he liked with the carriage pleased him above all, for the fair peasants had appeared in a most elegant carriage the preceding evening, and Albert was not sorry to be upon an equal footing with them. At 1:30 they descended. The coachman and footman had put on their livery over their disguises, which gave them a more ridiculous appearance than ever, and which gained them the applause of Franz and Albert. Albert had fastened the faded bunch of violets to his buttonhole. At the first sound of the bell they hastened into the Corso by the Via Vittoria. At the second turn, a bunch of fresh violets, thrown from a carriage filled with harlequins, indicated to Albert that, like himself and his friend, the peasants had changed their costume, also, and whether it was the result of chance, or whether a similar feeling had possessed them both, while he had changed his costume they had assumed his. Albert placed the fresh bouquet in his buttonhole, but he kept the faded one in his hand, and when he again met the calash, he raised it to his lips, an action which seemed greatly to amuse not only the fair lady who had thrown it, but her joyous companions also. The day was as gay as the preceding one, perhaps even more animated and noisy. The Count appeared for an instant at his window, but when they again passed he had disappeared. It is almost needless to say that the flirtation between Albert and the fair peasant continued all day. In the evening, on his return, Franz found a letter from the embassy, informing him that he would have the honor of being received by His Holiness the next day. At each previous visit he had made to Rome, he had solicited and obtained the same favor, and incited as much by a religious feeling as by gratitude. He was unwilling to quit the capital of the Christian world without laying his respectful homage at the feet of one of St. Peter's successors who has set the rare example of all the virtues. He did not then think of the carnival, for in spite of his condescension and touching kindness, one cannot incline one's self without awe before the venerable and noble old man called Gregory XVI.